Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. Hope you're doing well at home. We're here to talk about interviews and salary conversations. Just wanted to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about some things that are coming down the pike for seniors, despite being in maybe an unexpected circumstances right now. But my name is Rebecca Sullens. For those who don't know me, I am a 2009 Cornell alum, and I'm a career coach and associate director within the Berry Career Institute. And later joining me is going to be Zoe Russell, the assistant director of alumni engagement, and she's going to talk to you guys a little bit about connecting to the alumni network and how they can help you with some of these discussions and just these kind of increasingly difficult times. So thanks for joining us. Please do mute yourself if you're not speaking. And if you have questions that you want to submit while I'm talking, please go ahead and submit those down below in the chat. And then Zoe will flag me and let me know when we have questions to answer. So, okay. So just a little bit about me. I'm a sociology and Spanish minor. I graduated from Cornell in 2009, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do right after graduation. Event planning and marketing was kind of where I thought maybe I wanted to take my liberal arts education. But I was offered a job at Yellow Book, which was the phone book, as a telemarketer right out of college. It wasn't my favorite job, but I did learn a lot, and I didn't really realize it at the time. But graduating in 2009, it was not a great economy. It wasn't an awesome time to try to get a job. There was a lot of people who were out of work who had more experience or more education than me. And I was pretty focused on my own outcomes at that time. So looking at kind of what was happening economically didn't totally set in until maybe I was realizing that some of the jobs that I had available to me were maybe not what I expected when I was going through school. So I just kind of want to share some of that with you guys because I think it is relevant now, just going into some uncertain times with coronavirus and how that might affect the economy and the ability to get a job. These things are cyclical. They happen. We recover from them. I've been a liberal arts major from Cornell who has found a job, multiple jobs in these types of circumstances. So hopefully I can help give you some tips to feel even more confident on what you can do during these times that might feel a little bit unsure. So definitely just want to give our condolences to seniors who are missing out on some things this year that I know you were looking forward to, and we definitely know that that's a loss. The future can feel a little uncertain right now, but the Berry Career Institute and Cornell really want to encourage you to connect with us. Let us know what you're going through. What are you feeling nervous about? We really want to help you feel like this is a manageable time to get through, and we're going to continue to offer services through the summer and until you find the right opportunity. So please don't hesitate to reach out. So in an uncertain economy, there's a lot of things that you can't control. And so what I want to encourage you to do today with some of this content is take control of the things that are within your control. And that includes your level of preparation. So when you do have a job interview, you might not have as many to go in there and kind of get the practice ahead of time. And so if you can go ahead and be as prepared as you can be when you do get an interview, it's going to be that much more important for you to have that experience ahead of time through either a mock interview and just going through the things we're talking about today. Learning new skills is another thing that you can control. So you do possibly have a decent amount of downtime. I know it can feel boring and monotonous and it's already a lot on the computer, but learning new skills and also building your network, which you can do virtually. Those are all things that you can control and be doing during this time in order to set yourself up to be in a good spot when it's time to look for a job, or if you don't have a job, to find ways to leverage connections to find those jobs through people that you know. So we're going to talk today about interviews, different types of those, and kind of how to answer those basic questions, and then also talk about behavioral interviews, which are kind of those tricky, tell me about a time when X happened. We're also going to talk a little bit about salaries, just to get you understanding what you might expect, how to understand hourly versus salary, and also maybe how to negotiate a little bit, or just how to know your worth when you're having those discussions in order to accept a full-time offer. So going into the job interview stuff, obviously there's phone, in-person, and video interviews. Skype and Zoom have become more commonplace even before coronavirus, but obviously this is going to be something that continues to gain more and more momentum. But a lot of times the phone interview is what's used for that first round. It's not always the person making the hiring decision. A lot of times it's maybe an HR person who's just screening the initial applicants to narrow that down, that pool. But you do want to treat it like it's a real interview, and know your responses to some basic interview questions and know the job. And so don't treat that like it's like a blow-off phone call. It's definitely important to get you to the next round, which is generally an in-person or a video interview with somebody who is a decision maker. Sometimes that can be with multiple people. A lot of times the virtual ones might be with multiple people. And so we want to prepare for all of those as if, you know, that's the decision maker. So preparing for the interviews, you don't just want to go in and wing it. Interviews are something that there are some predictable elements, so you can prepare for those, but just knowing yourself and things that you're proud of, being familiar with the job description and the company are going to set you up to not have things come out of left field and kind of leave you feeling like a deer in the headlights. So the things that you should research ahead of time, if you want them to take an interest in you and hire you and give you a job, you need to show that you've taken an interest in the company seriously. So I recommend taking some time to do that research, writing that information down, and really taking it seriously to look into the history of the company, just take some notes on maybe the department you'd be working in, who's in charge, what's the leadership look like, what competitors are out there for them. If you know the person that you're going to be interviewing with, if you can go on LinkedIn and see their LinkedIn profile and the people that they're connected to, maybe you have some common connections there. Maybe they are a part of the same professional association that you're a part of. But knowing that information about your interviewer can sometimes make them feel like more of a real person and make you feel like you're going into an interview a little less blind. So as much as that some people feel like that's creepy, it's completely professional and acceptable to be looking into who it is that you're going to be interviewing at that company. That's not a weird thing at all. Welcome to Martin Rosenfeld. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. So looking into the finances, or also who is their customer, who's their client. The idea is you don't just want to go in and ask for this job if you haven't thought about what it would be like to be in the job and started thinking from inside of that organization. Again, who are our competitors, who's our customer, and like what are the overall goals of the organization. And so you want to do, possibly in addition to this research, do a drive-by so you know where you're going. Parking can sometimes be a little bit tricky, and so anything you can do to minimize surprises the day of is going to be advantageous to you. So if you have the ability to go and do that drive-by and you find out that a street is closed, you're going to set yourself up to not have that happen. If your dog ran out and made you a couple minutes later than you meant to be, and now you're kind of stressed out, it's one less thing to surprise you and throw you off your game. And then if you do that research ahead of time, take some notes, be prepared to go in and answer, what do you know about our company? By doing this research, you're also setting yourself up to possibly ask good questions at the end when they ultimately ask, what questions do you have for us? And that's generally not just about what we've talked about today. It's what questions do you have to prove you've done some research and prove that you're interested in our company. So in terms of attire, and I also encourage this for virtual interviews as well, don't throw away a virtual interview like you don't have to get dressed up. Part of it is also just feeling the confidence and knowing that you look good and you're dressed for the part. So I think sometimes that does factor into your mentality. So just in terms of preparing for the interview and what to wear, I would definitely decide that ahead of time, a couple days ahead of time. Make sure you've got clean clothes. Make sure that you maybe bust out an iron. I highly recommend a jacket for men or for women. When I worked at a staffing agency and we had to give people a score based on their professional dress. We couldn't give them the best score unless they were wearing a jacket or a blazer. And personally, I don't care to wear those. I think they're really uncomfortable and I feel kind of frumpy, but it is a sign of professionalism and a sign that you went a step further than you had to go. And so if it's down to you and one other person and you wore a jacket and that person didn't, that's potentially an extra half point that could put you above somebody else. So again, that's something that's within your control. So why not take advantage of, looking as sharp as you can. So yeah, just try to make sure, things match. If you don't have anything that's maybe just the exact right thing, if you can borrow something, going to Goodwill is a great place to get dress clothes. There's a lot of jackets, a lot of dress pants, that kind of thing, ties. If you're ever not sure what to wear, please just ask our office. We're happy to preview an outfit and give you some feedback on that. But you also want to keep, ladies, keep your makeup pretty neutral. You don't want to go in and look distracting. If you have tattoos, if you have piercings, you want to try to tone those things down, not because you don't want to be who you are, but because you want to be able to showcase your skills and your qualifications for the job. You don't want to go in and look like a visual distraction. And personally, I think people will be distracted by your appearance and maybe not paying as much attention to your responses. Types of interview questions, there's just these basic standard informational ones, things like tell me about yourself, which is always going to be the first question that they ask you. And so many students and alums and just professionals in general sometimes freeze up with this question. This one is, you don't want to mess this one up. So I don't want to put a lot of pressure on it. But the idea is you should go in knowing what parts of yourself you want to share. A lot of people are like, well, what do you want to know about? You tell me. This is your opportunity to tell me what's important to you, what's unique or interesting about you. You don't have to tell me why you're a good fit for the job yet. We're going to get to that for sure. But this is kind of your opportunity to maybe talk about a little bit something else that might not come up later that just makes you stand out as, interesting or unique. So we call that your elevator pitch, and that can usually include just things like maybe your background. So where you're from is a great place to start. I'm from the local area, or I'm from the East Coast. It just lets people know kind of your basis of reference, I suppose. But to then also mention, either where you went to school, and then maybe what you majored in and why. And then also maybe here's what I like to do outside of class, or what I like to do in my spare time. This is about a 1 to 2 minute question. You don't want to talk too long. So I recommend taking maybe 3 or 4 bullet points that you want to hit, and that's probably what you're going to want to focus on. So the idea is not to just go in and see what comes to mind when they ask you. Go in having an idea of what things you want to share, and then feel free to end with, and that's just a little bit about me. Anytime you're not sure how to finish your response or tell them that you're done, just repeat the question. It's also helpful to the interviewer to know that they're not cutting you off.
Hey, Rebecca, we have a question in the chat from Jessica.
Sure. Great.
She asked for the elevator pitch. How does it look different after graduation or if you're in graduate school?
That's a really good question. So again, I think starting with where you're from and maybe where you've been. So, say like Jessica, for example, if you're out in DC, say, well, I'm originally from Michigan. I recently graduated from Cornell College in Iowa. Here's what I've been studying, and ultimately I'm looking to get into XYZ. So sometimes, depending on the opportunity or the person that you're talking to, you might explain kind of where you're hoping to go. Or if you're looking for more of just like making friends in a new area or something like that, you might share some of those interests. Just kind of depends on what you want that person to know. Are you trying to turn this into an opportunity for somebody to connect you to an opportunity? Or are you just looking to find people with similar interests? In which case you'd probably say, and, recently I've been, playing on one of the like rec volleyball leagues in town. How about you? So the elevator pitch, as much as you do want to have a few things premeditated, realize you also want it to be conversational. So you don't want to just go into a long monologue. You do want to give a digestible amount of information and then check in with the other person and maybe ask them to reciprocate that information. Where did you go to school? Or are you originally from here? So does that answer your question? But yeah,
yes. Thank you.
So moving on, and so we just realized that, in an interview, going back into that detail, you can always do that later on. They might ask you for more details. So just realize that you can share a certain amount, and if they need more, they'll always ask for more. What sets you apart from other candidates? That's just something for you to know. What do you have that's special? Is it are you really, really good at Microsoft Excel? And again, this doesn't have to be like, I don't know, something really random. It could just be something that you do really well, and not everybody does that really well. So it doesn't have to be something overly exceptional. Just know what strengths you have. And if you know which ones not everybody else feels comfortable with, that's great. So especially, coming in with certain levels of like tech savvy, whether it's with programs or social media, find the things that you're good at. And that's where, although a lot of people in your generation know how to use social media, they don't all know how to run somebody's, page and manage their marketing, and schedule posts and that kind of thing. So you also want to know things that are relevant to the job that set you apart. So, if it requires a lot of people skills, that's probably one of the things you want to mention, is that you, are good at building relationships with new people quickly. Why do you want to work for this company? You definitely have to know this. They might not always ask you that, but this is something you might want to work in if they don't ask you, explaining, what do you know about our company? Well, I know these things, but, in particular, I'm really interested in XYZ company because of this. So it just lets people know that you're interested. You're not just looking for somebody who has a job opening. Kind of have an idea of what things might be a challenge for you in that job. So this might be the form of like, what's a weakness that you're working on, or, just kind of knowing areas that you might not be as strong, but anticipating those behavioral questions, which we'll talk about here in a second. A lot of times looking for what's going to be a possible challenge. So whether it's, working with the public, or difficult personalities, or, if you are going to be, doing things remotely, what are the things that you anticipate being a challenge, but then also you want to think through how might you overcome those challenges. So you always, anytime you're admitting something that's a weakness or a challenge, you want to show that can-do attitude of, but I'm not going to let it beat me, and this is how I'm going to try to attack that. So strengths and weaknesses. So as far as your strengths, this question can come in a lot of different forms. Tell me what strengths you bring to the position. Tell me why you're qualified. What top strengths are you really proud of? So there's a variety of ways people can ask this. And generally, you don't want to just pick something that you always go with, like, oh, I'm like really great at chugging beer. That's not relevant to the job, probably. So you want to make sure you pick something that is either universally beneficial, and or especially if you are applying for, again, a job that includes social media, and a strength of yours is getting a lot of likes and engagement, you might choose to say that versus, you're really great in Excel, because this job doesn't require that. So just gauge your weaknesses to make sure it's not going to be something that's a liability to the job, and you're proving that you're working on it. And a strength, or two or three, are kind of the main reasons why you feel like you're qualified. So just other things about, like, what do you know about our company? I probably should have put that almost first, but again, you want to prove that you've done research on the company. There's no reason that they should really move on forward with the interview if you can at least tell them generally what do they do, and here's a few tidbits that show I've done some research on more than the first page of the website. This is your opportunity. Again, assume you're not the only person interviewing for this job. You don't want to go in and say all the same things everybody else does. Prove you dug a little deeper. You also might want to be able to talk about, why did you major in what you majored in? Why did you decide to go to Cornell? Make sure that you get good at explaining that block plan in 1 to 2 sentences. For me, it's definitely that Cornell's one course at a time calendar has us learning a semester's worth of work in 3.5 weeks, and then explaining the fact that that's beneficial. So it's really immersive. It's very fast paced. And it's taught me how to be, a quick learner and set deadlines for myself. So behavioral questions, these are the ones that are a little more tricky. And psychologically, I kind of want to explain them to you. I think there's a lot of times people assume that this is just to see how well you think on your feet. And that's not necessarily it. This isn't supposed to be a pop quiz test to see if we can freak you out. The idea behind it is, after I worked at a staffing agency and was on the other side asking these questions, I realized there's a lot more purpose to them than that. If I'm a hiring manager and I'm sitting with, 15, 20, 30 candidates, and I don't know you very well, and I don't know how you're going to handle the challenges of this job. I might know that you have qualifications that make you a good fit, but if things don't go as planned, if there's difficult personalities, if coronavirus pops up, how do you respond to unexpected circumstances? And since I don't know you very well, the best we can really go off of is past performance. Past performance is pretty indicative of future performance. So if you can tell me a time that you handled a similar situation or a situation that used the same skill set, things like problem solving, communication, managing stress, or attention to detail, these are the types of things that it doesn't have to be the exact scenario that they're asking for, but the skill set should be a match. And so things like, tell me about a time when you dealt with a conflict in a group, or a time you had to juggle multiple priorities. The other thing about that is, with answering these questions, I can sometimes get stuck on these where I'm like, I know I have that exact same situation and I just can't remember what class it was or something like that. Like, I know I've done that, but I can't think of when. The example that you can't grasp is just let it go. It's not worth agonizing over. Go with something that you have in your hip pocket. And so maybe it's not an exact scenario that you had at work, but it's something that happens over and over in the writing studio at your work study job, where somebody might not understand what you're explaining and you have to explain it in a different way. So you don't have to pinpoint one specific point in time. You might tell the story kind of like you did, like it is one point in time, but you can just discuss things generally as well. So let's just look at the next slide in terms of diversifying these responses and not coming up with 15 different scenarios.
I have a quick question. Sorry, I have to be somewhere at noon, but I'm mostly tuned in, and I don't mean to like mess up the.
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Martin.
Organization you already have. But I mostly turned in for the salary bit,
sure.
Because I recently got accepted a position for a research position at Yale, which is cool, for 2 years.
Yeah.
But we are going to have negotiations about the salary, and I'm also between and so I'm stuck between two positions. There's an offer at Harvard for me, and there's one at Yale, and I'm trying to get the most out of the one at Yale, because that one actually allows me to negotiate the salary, but I want to be able to negotiate the salary. So do you have any quick tips on like how to do that, or like?
Sure. Do you know when you're having these conversations, Martin? Is it later today?
No, it's not later today. It's probably going to be either later this week or next week.
Okay. Well, in general, I would definitely say to speak in terms of ranges. So having like, that way you're not saying, well, I have to be at this number. You're saying I'd like to be between this and this. And so if it's above what they're offering, then you maybe go, 1,000 above and then 3,000 above and say, I'm really looking to be in here. But you kind of do have to have some justification for that. So whether knowing what the expenses for living are going to be and that you need more, or what's the skill set that you have that justifies you being paid more than that base pay. I will say we are recording this webinar and I can send you the link, but also if you're free this afternoon, we could just set up a one-on-one and we can talk through that more specifically if that's what you want to do.
Thank you. Yes, that would work.
Do you have time for that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay. I'm glad that you're engaged and tuning in for hot information that's relevant to you. Yeah, just shoot me an email and I will respond to you. I'd say probably like 2 o'clock or something will be great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Martin. So in terms of answering those behavioral questions and having some diverse examples to draw from, I recommend having 3 or 4 different spheres of life that you're kind of drawing from. Do we have another question? Maybe not.
No.
And so thinking of, okay, the different areas that you might experience, you know, challenges or success could be classroom examples, your work study job or your part-time job, maybe an internship or a research experience that you've had, as well as your extracurriculars. And so, you know, if you're a part of mock trial or a sports team, or you're in charge of environmental club, those are all examples of you interacting with other people, making decisions and that kind of thing. So thinking of a versatile scenario, like working in the writing studio and needing to explain things differently to people, that could be an example of communications. Maybe somebody got kind of angry at your response or your suggestions, and so it might be handling conflict. It might be, you know, dealing with difficult people. So just seeing that you could have a scenario that's happened in one area of your life, and you could pull out 2 or 3 skill sets that one scenario demonstrates. Now you can answer a variety of questions or steer the question towards a response that you have already kind of in mind. So I recommend maybe bulleting these things out in maybe a Google Doc, doing that with any of these interview responses. But especially for the behavioral questions, look for the ones that you know you have like great examples for, times you've really been challenged and come out on the other end of it, times you've really been proud of something. Those are really, really great dynamic examples to use for behavioral questions. And that's always something that we can talk about more one-on-one in an individual advising session. So please don't feel like we can't work through those together, because we do that all the time. So you always want to make sure that you follow up after an interview. You want to try to do so within 24 hours. As soon as you leave their office is maybe a little too soon to shoot them an email, but usually within a few hours, I think it's great. A handwritten thank you note is always fantastic. A lot of people don't do them, which is exactly why it makes you stand out. So, you know, earlier we talked about controlling the things that you can control. There's a lot in the interview and job search process that you cannot control. Sending a follow-up thank you or a handwritten thank you is one of those things you can control, and it can make you stand out in a really positive way. Honestly, I think if you send one via email that day, and then send one written by hand that's just a little bit different the same day, they'll get that 2 or 3 days later. And so it kind of serves as a reminder of, hey, you've interviewed a lot of people since, and here I am again with kind of a classy follow-up. If you feel like that's overkill, feel free to just pick one, but realize that the email is really intended to send the thank you quickly so they get it if they're making a decision tomorrow. But the after the fact one is to possibly remind them of you when they're later on in the process. If you have questions about who to send that to, generally the main interviewer, or if you're interviewed with several people, you could address them as a group, but feel free to ask me that individually if you're not sure who to send that to. And the thing to know about follow-up is generally if you haven't heard, 2 weeks is about standard for you to maybe hear something back. But in the interview, I think that's one of the greatest questions to ask in the interview is, can you give me an idea of when your hiring time, what your hiring timeline is, or what is your timeline for making a decision? Hiring takes a lot of time. It takes time to get the people in the room who need to make the decisions. It takes time to schedule the interviews with all the people who have their own schedules. And then it takes time to make an offer and hear back. So be respectful of that process. Let them complete that process. But inquiring what it looks like and finding out they're not going to be done with interviews for at least 2 weeks probably means they won't have a decision for you at the end of 2 weeks. It might be a little longer than that. Hiring can take several months as well. So asking that question is very fair, but don't just say, when will I hear back? Ask more respectfully in terms of learning more about their hiring timeline, if they can share that with you. So if you haven't heard back and it's been at least 2 weeks, maybe 3, you want to be respectful if they say no phone calls, or you might ask how you might reach out. what would be the best way to reach out to follow up on the position because you're really interested. So always letting people know it's not that you're impatient, you're excited and interested. Any questions about that follow-up stuff? Okay, so just additional advice, repeat the question if it's unclear or if you need a little bit more time to answer it. You wanna make sure that you're being honest. If there's questions that you feel like you're not sure how to answer, or it feels like, yeah, you have to pretend like you're better than you are at something. That is something that I talk with students a lot about, where they feel like they're not good at selling themselves. They're uncomfortable. They feel like they're bragging. Again, we don't want you to be cocky or misleading, but you do have to own the things that you're good at and be able to tell somebody why they should hire you. And those things take time. And that's why working with our office on this more than, just the day before an interview is a great way to build that skill set and build that interviewing muscle. Give examples from previous experiences. So, just saying that you're good at multitasking and like setting deadlines, if you can't put that into context, it sounds like empty words. You could just be telling me that because it sounds good. So you want to be able to back up what you're saying with examples. Smile and show enthusiasm. I think at the beginning or the end of the question is probably, in the beginning and the end of the interview, are the easiest times to, when you're not scratching your head as much, throw in some smiles and some eyebrow raises. And, people want to see that you're personable. And although your nerves might be at play, you don't want to come off as a scary person or a really serious person, too serious. Maintain eye contact. If it's more than one person, make sure you move that around. Sit up straight. Try not to fidget. Putting your hands in your lap folded or on the table folded is a good way to keep yourself from fidgeting. Gesture with your hands, but also don't get too crazy. That's also things we look out for in mock interviews, so we can give you feedback on if there's something that is a little distracting. We can help you get on top of that before you're in front of a decision maker. And make sure that you're polite to everybody that you meet. Your interview starts from the minute you walk in the door, possibly even when you're in the parking lot. So just realize that before you get in that interview room, who you're kind to, who you hold the door for, could potentially matter. So you never know. The receptionist is somebody that really, they're the gatekeeper. They control a lot in that office. And if word comes that you were rude to them, a lot of times that's going to get back to the decision maker. Ask questions. You always want to go in and make sure you're prepared to ask a couple of questions. Online, we have an interview guide, and I can link to that as well, that has examples of questions to ask in the interview. Things like, what is the last person who was in this position, what did they move on to do? Or, what's your favorite thing about XYZ? But you want to make sure you're not asking questions just to ask one when they're easy to find the answers to. Again, this is kind of a test to say, prove to me you've done some research and that you are genuinely interested, versus prove to me you took a question off of something online and you hope that it didn't sound dumb. We can always help you vet those questions as well. You can always just email us and say, hey, these are questions I was going to ask. How do these look? Express thanks. So especially when you go to leave, to say, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I'm really interested in this position. That's just something that I think a lot of people forget to mention, and it comes across as very sincere and refreshing. And then just in general, you want to try to be yourself, or a more polished version of yourself, a confident version of yourself. But you want to be somebody who other people want to work with. And so by, if you're nervous, feel free to let people know. I mean, you can say, oh, sorry, I'm just a little nervous, but I'm really interested in this opportunity. So just realize that everybody else is human on the other side of the table too. Take a deep breath, and doing the preparation ahead of time is what's going to make this more manageable. Scheduling a mock interview with the Berry Career Institute is probably the best thing you can do to prepare for interviews. Get your wiggles out and your bad responses and some of your nerves out with us. We're not here to judge you. We want to make sure that you put your best foot forward, and if it takes a couple of tries to get that great response, again, we don't want you to be scripted. but we want you to be prepared. You want to know what you have to offer and go in making sure you share that. And if you're just going in winging it, it's very likely things are going to come out of your mouth that you didn't intend to, or your mind's going to go blank. Preparation is what keeps those horrific ideas of what can go wrong in an interview from really happening. And so we're your friends. We're here to make this easy on you. If it's uncomfortable to do in a mock interview, you're going to be glad that you were uncomfortable with us. The real thing is going to feel a lot less uncomfortable. But if you go in and as soon as you have they say, tell me about yourself. And you're like, I knew they were going to ask me that and I didn't study it. You can see your confidence go down. And so we just want to make sure you're able to go in and really show what you know instead of be shaken by your nerves and just kind of see how it goes. And then we all know it didn't feel very good. So we'll help you learn to tailor your responses to the employer and the job that you're applying for. And we'll give you feedback and strategies, as an impartial party. But we're also people who have conducted professional interviews. And so we do have feedback from employers and know kind of what they're looking for. So now that we've talked about this, hopefully you get a job offer or several out of this. And so at that point, that's what we've been working towards. And now we've got it. Now what do we do? So you want to continue to explore that culture of that organization, connecting to other people who have been new recently or who are your same age group is going to help you get a better feel for how to start out in that organization. But asking about benefits and money and pay, those are all things that should happen in not the first interview, probably not the second interview. Generally, you shouldn't bring those things up. So just know that generally that's going to be a separate conversation after you've been given an offer. So don't go in getting ready to negotiate things before they've decided that they like you and that they want you. So right there, I'm going to pause and see if anybody had any questions about those things. And our salary talk is a little bit less lengthy, but it is a good thing to talk about, to just know what that next step is and set yourself up to be able to do a little bit of research. So if hopefully your interview process does move along smoothly and you get the offer, you're prepared for that next step. Okay. So full-time salaries, I think we're all, coming out of college, everybody's at least got some, part-time work experience, maybe some babysitting, maybe work study. A lot of times these are all hourly positions. So getting a salary, getting, yearly income that's predictable is kind of new. And so we want to make sure that you feel comfortable talking about that. And so one of the things I like to ask people is, what do they expect to make, hourly, or what have you made in your positions previously per hour, and how does that maybe compare to what you'd expect to make per hour in your professional full-time job right out of college? Jessica, can you share maybe what you're making at a part-time job, or a range if you're comfortable with that, and then maybe what hourly pay you think you might make as a professional?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you know, what have you made in some of your previous jobs? What wage have you possibly been paid?
In Washington, D.C., minimum wage is $14 an hour. And in Denver, Colorado, it's typically $12 an hour.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And do you have an idea of maybe what you would be hoping to make when you get out of college? Just entry level hourly pay? Would you expect to make the same, that minimum wage, or somewhere above that?
A few dollars above that. So I know in graduate school, part-time jobs there, they pay about $14 to $15. And then you get $1 increase for your second year in grad school because you have more experience.
Great. And it sounds like you've done some research on that.
Yes.
Great. And where have you found that information?
For graduate school, I know that they let you know when they offer you a position, or they tell you you're eligible for working on our campus. And looking just in cities, looking up jobs and seeing what is the normal salary, what's the normal hourly pay. So for camp counselors in Denver, it's 12 to 13, and other jobs are a little bit higher.
Sure. Great. Well, and the other thing you can always, ask people as well. So whether you know people who have started out in that area, it's something you can look up, but also trying to ask people that you might know what their you might not ask them what they make, but you want to make sure that you maybe ask if they're aware of kind of what a starting range is for somebody with your experience level. So thank you for sharing that. So yeah, what we want to encourage you to do is get an idea of what is it that you've been making maybe at a part-time job. If it's, $10 an hour, I know we might be paying a lot less than that in your work study jobs. I apologize. That's a federal thing. I apologize. But knowing what that translates to, if that's, 40 hours a week times 52 weeks a year, if you were working full time, what would that translate to? So I want to share this kind of wage conversions chart with you. And it starts at $10 an hour and goes across to what is that per week, per month, and per year. And it goes all the way up to like 2025. And just looking at this, I think there's a lot of students in the past who have said, oh, usually I'm used to making about $10 an hour. I probably want to make like $16 an hour when I graduate, but I think I want to make probably like 50 or 60,000. And, $16 an hour translates to a little more than 33,000 so per year. So just want to encourage you to take a look, do the math to understand that and look at this chart. Because I think it's very easy to say, well, yeah, I'm used to be paid hourly. This is a wage that sounds better than what I'm used to making. But then realizing like, oh, that's not the glamorous wage that I think I'd like to make a year. But then also grounding that in what does it actually cost to have housing in that city? Usually that should be about a third of what you're making. But also another thing to consider is gross versus net. So when you are considering what you want to be paid, realize that on this chart here, if you're making $11 an hour and that's $22,000 a year, yeah, that doesn't feel like a whole lot. Well, you're also not taking home that $11 an hour if you have deductions from your paycheck. So understanding, the gross salary is what you take home, what your job pays. But then the net salary is what you're actually taking home. And so things like that, like taxes, if you have health insurance where you're that's being deducted from your paycheck, but also then if you have, like retirement savings, things like that, there's going to be different things that'll pull from your paycheck to give us a difference between what you're actually putting in your pocket. So you want to know what your salary allows you to afford. And so to kind of look at the gross and net again, if we're looking at a job that pays $16 or $17 an hour, yearly, that could be, 35,000. And you can see what that is, divided by 12, divided by what is it, 26 pay periods? Yeah. And then what that looks like weekly, $35,000 a year, $16 to $17 an hour in that gross area, it's, almost $700 a week. That sounds great. But if we actually look at what it is, what you take home after some of those deductions, then it's actually going to be more like $24,000. And weekly, that's going to be more like $473 or maybe a little less than $1,000 a paycheck, which is still livable if you budget. And that's something that I want to encourage you to think about and maybe attend tomorrow on Wednesday at 11:30. We'll be talking about budgeting and how to get one started. In order to negotiate salary, you kind of have to know what is typical for that industry, for that region. As Jessica was saying, we have a pretty big difference between, minimum wage in Colorado versus Washington, D.C. That has to deal with cost of living and those types of things. So just because you might be living in a bigger city and your salary sounds, like you're making so much more, that's to compensate for the fact that it costs so much more to live there. So some resources to figure out what's normal in your area or your industry are things like the NACE salary survey. NACE stands for the National Association for Colleges and Employers. And so they do a lot of research with employers in order to get some of these entry-level salaries. And then ONET, which is the government resource, they have a lot of salaries listed, as well as Glassdoor. Glassdoor is kind of a crowdsourced website for information about companies. It's kind of like ratemyprofessor.com for companies. So people can say what they liked or didn't like about working there, what questions they were asked in the interview, which I highly recommend checking out, as well as, you know, what salary they got for a certain job. So there's not always information on there for the company that you're interviewing with, but it's always worth checking. It can really give you some insight into the real numbers or real questions that they're asking in interviews. But you just want to make sure that you do adjust those salary expectations for the cost of living of the city that you're going to be living in. So we'll look at something for, you know, different majors, but that also really depends on where you're living. And also that's not guaranteed. That's just kind of maybe like a middle number from those who responded to a survey. So you also have to be able to, I mentioned this to Martin, you know, you have to know why you deserve more than what they're offering. Do you have special skills? Do you have work experience? Do you have, you know, advanced software knowledge? Why do you deserve to be paid more than what they generally offer everybody else? And you also want to recognize when negotiating is not a good idea. Sometimes it's not up for negotiation. You don't want to lose the job offer because you seemed too entitled to more. So in terms of setting your expectations, I'm going to try to set them a little low and set you guys up to be pleasantly surprised. But I had this chart from 2014, or I probably shared it in 2016 because some of the salary information is a couple years behind because it takes a while to gather it. But here's just in 2014, for the class of 2014, what it looked like they could look at for like an average for income for a year in kind of traditionally liberal arts and humanities majors. So if you look, you know, just down that first or second column of the mean, we're looking at kind of mid to high 30,000s. And then if we switch over to the most recent data that's available for the class of 2018 and what they were making with humanities and social science majors, we're seeing things that are more middle to upper 50s. I don't know that things have really changed that much in 6 years, or I guess in 4 years between the class of 2014 and class of 2018. So what I would encourage you to do is kind of look for something in the middle and realize that probably low 40s, you know, low to high 40s is probably going to be your range, unless you're maybe a computer science student or economics and business, you know, with maybe more finance experience and like coding. So just know that some of those liberal artsy jobs, you know, might pay less than that. It doesn't mean that you can't work your way up, but just realize that based on these charts, somewhere in the 40s is probably fairly common, but then you'll also have to drill down to your industry, your state, your location, that kind of thing. So this is just kind of general jumping off stuff. Like I said, I'd rather set your expectations low and have you be pleasantly surprised. Reasonable, like starting off in Iowa, a lot of times is like $35,000 to $37,000 a year. So, you know, that's around what I want to say, like $17 or $18 an hour. Which is really nothing to sneeze at. So just realize looking at some of these bigger numbers, you know, you can still live off of, you know, $35,000, $40,000. A lot of us in higher education do, but you can, you know, share costs. You might not be buying a new car or anything like that, but you can generally support yourself on like a third of that income. So just know that although you might not be in a position to negotiate too much, $1,000 to $2,000, it might not make a huge difference to you, but it could, if you don't at least ask, it might take you several years before you're in a position to ask for a raise. And so it could take you 6 to 7 years to recoup $2,000 with incremental raises, which are usually like anywhere from 1% to 2.5%. So if you just maybe try to negotiate a little bit more upfront, it might save you trying to crawl up with some teeny tiny increments over a couple of years. So when you are negotiating those things, you don't want to leave money on the table, but you don't want to seem overly eager. And so what you can do, like I mentioned to Martin in his question, is talk about ranges. So if they're offering, $39,000, you could say, I was really hoping to be closer to like the, like $40,000 to $43,000 range, which at least gives them the ability to say, okay, I'll come up one more to put you in that range. But it can be tricky to do that. So let's talk about that more specifically if you have a specific example. So just some don'ts to make sure you don't come in guns blazing. Don't assume that it's their final offer. You could say you wanted to be in that 40 to 43 range, and they could say 39 is our final offer. And that's how you know when to stop. So don't assume that the first number you're given is the final offer, but you also don't want to be caught unprepared without the information to justify. So whether it's about your expenses and you needing to financially be in that higher bracket, or saying, based on the cost of living expenses that I've looked at for this area that I'll be relocating to, and the apartment costs that I'm seeing, and the transportation that I would need in order to get there, I really am looking to be in this range in order to be able to support myself and making that jump to this new location. So you want to make sure you have justification, and make sure that you don't sound too entitled, because really it's a question. They can say no. And don't forget that the value of the job is also beyond the perks, beyond the salary. So there can be perks like, if this is really your dream job, you might not want to negotiate yourself out of a job, because it can be hard to find those jobs. It's probably somebody else's dream job, and somebody else will probably do it for $1,000 or $2,000 less. Realize that if you have great time off that's being offered to you, if they're paying for parking, those are reasons why you might not negotiate. But if those things aren't covered, then those might be the things you try to negotiate is, okay, so I'll take 39 sounds great. Would you be able to pay for parking? So just realize those are other fringe kind of perks that you could negotiate with. So you do want to make sure you do some research, look at several different websites to make sure that you're not just pulling something out of thin air and not verifying it somewhere else. We talked about talking in terms of ranges where you'd like to be. Again, it's kind of like asking about the hiring timeline versus when will I find out? One sounds a little bit more pushy than the other, which just sounds kind of courteous and inquisitive. Try to let the employer go first. So if they say, well, what are you looking to make? That's why it is helpful to give a range. And in that situation, you might want to give a broader range and go up higher, expecting them to probably go a little lower. But again, you want to have an idea that your initial impulse is not totally out in left field compared to what's the norm for your area. Spell out the value that you create for the company. So letting them know that, I feel strongly that I'm a good fit for this position, and I know that I can come in and provide, like all this social media knowledge. I have all this like pivot tables and Excel, these things that, can be hard to find. And I feel like it might justify a slightly higher pay range. And be aware, again, that these things change, whether it's a nonprofit company versus a corporate company, and the job responsibilities, like those things can all really affect the offer. So again, this is something that, jumping off from these things, we should still probably talk about more individually with a Berry Career Institute career coach. If you haven't officially been offered a position, definitely don't start negotiating. So again, keep that in mind. You don't want to try to talk money too soon. And you want to make sure that you know that they want you. And so that you have the ability to negotiate once you know that they want you. If they tell you it's their best offer, stop negotiating. Realize you can always ask for a little bit more time to think it over. Can I have 24 hours to think it over? It just gives you the opportunity to feel good about it, get a break from the conversation, and then come back and maybe say, yeah, okay, I'll take what you offered me. But just make sure that you have a justification. Don't negotiate just to feel like a hotshot. So just to kind of recap what we talked about, you want to make sure you research your value, be aware of how raises and other perks can affect, your bottom line. If they're offering to pay for like dry cleaning, or, these things may or may not apply to your first job out of college, but they do exist out there. Know that some offers and industries justify negotiating and some do not. We can help you decipher those things. And just be aware of your competition and realize that you do have to start somewhere. It's not always where you're going to be. If you have to supplement your income another way, because it's a job that's really unique and you're really excited about it, you might just have to donate plasma on the side. And hey, a lot of us have done that already. So realize that there's a way to make your ends meet, even if it's not all about the salary that you get on your first job offer after college. And if you're staying at home and saving money on rent, then you're in an even better position to get the experience right out of college without having to worry as much about the salary. So with that, again, we want to make sure you guys are looking at what you can control in these tricky times where there's a lot that's outside of our control. So things that you can control is how much you prepare for your interviews, like doing one with the BCI on a mock interview, sending a thank you note. That's something that's within your control. Joining a young professional organization to meet more people, let people know, I was in a telemarketing position. That's not what I hoped to be doing eventually. So meeting other people and letting them know where I'd like to be in event planning and marketing for a nonprofit helped people then share those things with me when they knew it was available. Like we mentioned, getting a side job for extra money. Sometimes your full-time job is not going to be your passion, and that's okay. As much as we'd like it to be, you can sometimes pay the bills with your full-time job and do something passionate on the side that then helps you meet people and work towards that. You want to reach out to influencers and alums in your area for mentorship. That's something that, we talked about building your network. That's always going to be a good use of your time. And so what I want to do is invite Zoe to weigh in and talk about a new resource that the alumni office has in order to help you get connected to alumni. Zoe?
Great, thanks, Rebecca. And if you hear any dog barking in the background, I apologize. I have a dog who's barking right now. But yeah, I just wanted to let you know about a new opportunity we have in the alumni office. It's a new platform called Cornell Connect. So if you can imagine Facebook and LinkedIn combined, but it's only creating a community for strictly Cornellians. That's what Cornell Connect is. We actually launched it this morning, and we're having awesome results so far. We already have like over 150 alumni have signed out just today. So we really think it's going to be a great way for you as incoming alumni to connect with the larger alumni community. So the platform itself, if you're still in a position where you're trying to find job opportunities, you'll see job opportunities directly on this platform. It's going to pull in the feed that you would usually see through the Barry Career Institute, but it also allows alumni to post jobs there. So you might find some additional opportunities. A really cool way to also get connected with the alumni network is that there's an opportunity for mentorship. So as you can see on the screen, this is just a general feed. You see it looks like a typical social media feed. But if you look in the directory, once you'll be added to this platform, you can search alumni based on their major, based on their job, current title that they're in. You can also search by previous jobs. And so this way you can connect directly with alumni who perhaps were involved in the exact company that you're interviewing for or involved in the general field you're interested in. And then on this platform, you can send them a message directly. And so then you can be like, hey, I'm really interested in getting involved in this work. I noticed you had worked here previously. Would you mind having a Zoom call with me or exchanging some emails or whatever they're interested in? And another cool feature of this site is based on when you sign up for a profile, you answer a series of questions, and alumni do the same. And then what the program does via its algorithm is it pairs you up with alumni. So it says, hey, I'm a 90% match with Rebecca based on what our interests are, or based on what our major was, or what careers we're involved in. So it can kind of pair you up with alumni who would be really well tailored to help you on the job search or trying to make connections that way. And so obviously, as in a few months' time, you'll be alumni. And so you'll have every resource on this site as a Cornell alum. But also, we wanted to make sure you all had opportunity to get on the site a little bit earlier as you're kind of entering the workforce and being able to leverage those alumni connections. So we will be adding you all to the site in mid to late April. Just look out for an email from me. I'm Zoe. And we'll get you set up on the site so you can utilize those job connections, but then also start connecting with Cornellians in your area. Another great feature of this too is if you're trying to figure out, when Rebecca's talking about like salary negotiations, you want to figure out more about cost of living or what it really is like to live somewhere. There's a map feature on this directory, and so you can kind of see the map and see where Cornellians are. So, you know, hey, I have this job offer in St. Louis. I'm not really sure how much rent costs there or what to expect about like what utility costs are usually like. You'll be able to find alumni to message on this platform and try to get some of those questions answered. So we're really excited about this. Like I said, it's a brand new platform for Cornellians, and we're excited to get you loaded into the platform later this month. But this will be a great way to really leverage your connections for professional opportunities. But if you tune into the platform, this webinar tomorrow, I'll talk about the platform's abilities to help with just kind of personal connections or kind of meeting friends after college or finding more of those questions about life after Cornell. So this platform is kind of one of the biggest ways that we'll be able to help you as seniors, but also as new alumni. We also have a few other opportunities. If you just reach out to the alumni office, the email is alumni@cornellcollege.edu. We can really help you connect with Cornellians if you knew of alumni you wanted to get connected with, or you just had general information that you needed about what it's like to be an alum or what kind of opportunities we provide. You can reach out directly to us and we'll be in contact with you come May when you become Cornell alumni. And then you can also utilize the alumni tool on LinkedIn. So you can kind of search by whether people are Cornell College alumni and to figure out whether, once again, if someone is in the industry you're interested in, if they're working in a company you're interested in, you can get some of those questions answered. And the Barry Career Institute can also help you utilize those tools to connect with Cornellians. So stay on the lookout for an email from us about how to get you connected with Cornellians, how to get a platform like Cornell Connect utilized to help you succeed past Cornell. But that's it for kind of help from the alumni office.
Cool. Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, you guys will hopefully be hearing more and seeing more from Zoe. She is an amazing resource in the alumni office, as well as Michael Geneser. So we just want you guys to know who these people are, that they're resources for you as well. You know, our office in the Barry Career Institute, we can get you connected to alums, but these are your alumni relations folks that you're going to continue to hear from. So if you have questions about using Cornell Connect, Zoe's a great resource for that. You are a part of this Cornell network, and now more than ever, like, I don't know if you guys realize just how much alums want to go out of their way for somebody who went to their same college. If you went to the University of Iowa, I know everybody's excited about, you know, Hawkeyes and that kind of thing, but those are just hundreds of thousands of people who maybe don't feel as close-knit as our Cornell community. So the fact that you probably stayed in the same dorm as one of these people, that you probably, you know, have a favorite spot on campus that's also their favorite spot on campus, or you had a professor that they also had. There really is that close-knit community that if you haven't tapped into that alumni network yet, and if Jessica was here, I know she could tell you, once you reach out to an alum and just say, hey, I'm, you know, a new grad, or I'm a current student, can you provide some perspective on this? People are really willing to go out of their way for you. So the worst they can tell you is no. And so that's where we really want to encourage you to utilize these tools to connect to alums, because they do, if you don't have a network yet, Cornell is your network, and all of them have networks beyond Cornell. So that reach is so much bigger if you plug into things like Cornell Connect and the LinkedIn alumni community. So just know that we're here for you. And if you have additional questions regarding what we've talked about here today or other things, here's me and Zoe's contact information. And also tomorrow we do have Adulting 101 happening, which is going to be about budgeting for life after college, talking about how to create a budget, how to start maybe setting up some automatic payments, and how to not get yourself in trouble with starting to pay these different bills or student loans that are coming your way. We'll talk a little bit about credit cards, and then we'll also have Olivia Lennon from Res Life joining us to talk more about finding your own place. So kind of leaving the nest, but also what are the reasons to maybe consider staying home if that's an option for you, and how can you make that, turn that into something beneficial so you can save money, and just kind of knowing what you can afford. So please join us tomorrow at 11:30 Central Time via Zoom. That information to connect is on the master calendar as well as via Handshake. And we hope we can see more of you guys and help you just launch your new Cornell alumni status. So thanks so much for tuning in, and yeah, have a great week. Let me see.